They told him winter was silent in Ironvale Ridge, but that night the snow was screaming. Officer Rowan Hale did not expect to find anything on his patrol except the same old road and the same old cold. Until something moved under the snow beside an abandoned toolbox. Inside was a German Shepherd puppy, no more than 4 months old, barely breathing, with a piece of paper that said, "Forgive me." He did not know her name yet. He did not know she would change his life. And he did not know that before this winter ended, the whole town would owe their hope to that little dog. Stay with this story, because it is about second chances and the quiet miracles that happen when someone refuses to walk away. And before we begin, tell me where you are watching from today. Leave your city or country in the comments below. Ironvale Ridge, Montana wore winter-like armor. The town sat cupped between black pine slopes and slate-colored mountains, the kind of place where the sky looked close enough to touch and the snow fell as if it had a grudge. On that particular afternoon, the air hovered around -18°C, wind-driven flakes skittering across the road like white insects, and the world had the muted hush of a church before the first hymn. Patrol car tires whispered over packed snow as Officer Rowan Hale drove the outer loop, the road that circled the old logging trailheads and scattered cabins. Rowan was 37, tall in a way that made door frames look like suggestions, lean but broad-shouldered, with a rugged face that seemed carved by cold mornings and long nights. His hair was dark brown, cut close out of habit, and faint lines bracketed his mouth as if he'd learned to smile carefully, the way someone handles a fragile glass. A pale scar ran near his right knuckle, a small souvenir of a past he didn't talk about much. In Ironvale, folks knew him as steady, quiet, and stubbornly decent. They also knew he'd once been the kind of man who laughed easily, before a winter years ago took something from him on a call that ended in sirens and silence. After that, his kindness became more disciplined, his warmth rationed, like a lantern you keep shaded so it doesn't burn out. That day, dispatch hadn't given him anything dramatic. No accidents, no fights, just a welfare check earlier and a reminder to watch for stranded travelers. Still, Rowan's eyes kept scanning the shoulders, the drifts, the odd shapes the snow made of ordinary things. Winter liked to disguise danger as scenery. His heater hummed, the vents breathing lukewarm air that never quite reached his fingers. He flexed them around the steering wheel and told himself he was only cold because the town was cold, not because he carried a private blizzard inside his chest. He turned onto a narrower road that ran beside a stand of pines, their branches sagging with snow. The headlights caught a row of old mailboxes ahead, and beyond them, the dull silhouette of a small turnout where hunters sometimes parked. Nothing moved. No taillights. No footprints, at least none that were fresh. Rowan might have kept driving if not for something that did not make sense. A faint, uneven tremor beneath the drift near the turnout, like the snow itself was breathing. He eased to a stop and killed the radio. In the sudden quiet, the wind spoke louder, a low, constant growl. Rowan stared a moment longer. The tremor happened again, delicate, almost embarrassed to exist. He stepped out into the cold and the world punched him in the lungs. The kind of cold that felt personal, that made your eyelashes stiff and your thoughts sharpen. Snow crunched under his boots as he walked toward the turnout. A half-buried object sat just off the road, and at first his mind tried to label it something harmless. A toolbox, maybe, abandoned by some careless hunter. It was metal, rectangular, dark green once, now worn and scratched. Snow had drifted up around it, swallowing most of it, leaving only the top corner exposed. Rowan crouched and brushed snow away with his gloved hands. The metal was so cold it seemed to leach warmth through the leather. Then he saw the gap, a narrow seam where the lid didn't sit flush. From inside came a sound so small it barely qualified as sound, a thin, strained breath. Rowan's body moved before his thoughts did. He cleared the lid with quick, forceful sweeps, sending powdery snow into the air. The latch was stiff with ice. He tried once, twice, then hooked a finger under it and jerked hard. It gave with a snap that sounded too loud in the quiet. When he lifted the lid, a pocket of air escaped. Not warm, not truly, but different, damp with the animal smell of fear and life. Inside, curled against the bottom like a comma in a sentence nobody finished, was a German Shepherd puppy. She was young, maybe 4 months, black and tan coat dulled by dust and frost. One ear flopped forward while the other tried to stand up and failed, as if even her cartilage was tired. Snow crystals clung to her whiskers. Her ribs didn't jut dramatically, but she was too thin for winter, too light for the world she'd been thrown into. Her eyes, dark, amber-brown, looked up at Rowan without barking, without whining, just wide and fixed, as if she'd already learned that noise didn't always bring mercy. She trembled in tight, involuntary shivers, and her paws were tucked under her belly in the classic posture of hypothermia, a small body trying to fold itself into less pain. Rowan felt something raw peel open behind his ribs. He had seen stranded deer, frozen cats, injured dogs hit by trucks. But there was something about the neatness of this cruelty, the way someone had chosen a metal box, chosen the cold, chosen secrecy, that made his throat tighten. He spoke softly, the way you speak to a skittish miracle. Hey there. The puppy's gaze didn't break. Her nose twitched once, faintly, like she was reading the story of him through scent. Winter air, leather, coffee, loneliness. Rowan slid one hand under her chest and the other beneath her hindquarters. She was startlingly limp, not in surrender, but in exhaustion. When he lifted her, her body barely resisted gravity, and that frightened him more than any growling dog ever had. Beneath where she'd been lying was a crumpled scrap of paper, damp at the edges. Rowan picked it up. The handwriting was hurried, shaky, the ink smeared as if a glove had brushed it while someone's hands trembled. 2 words stared up at him like a confession offered to a god who might not answer. Forgive me. Rowan swallowed. He looked back at the toolbox and imagined a person crouching in the snow, placing this puppy inside, closing the lid, walking away. The cold did what cold always does. It erased footprints. It quieted evidence. It pretended it had no opinion. Not today, Rowan murmured, not sure who he was talking to. The winter, the unknown person, his own past. The puppy's head lolled against his arm. Her eyes stayed open. He carried her to the patrol car with the careful speed of someone transporting a candle through wind. Inside the vehicle, he cranked the heat and turned the fan to full blast, then shrugged out of his heavy coat. He wrapped it around her, cocooning her small body so only her face showed. He grabbed a water bottle from his console, unscrewed it, and tipped a few drops into the cap. He let the cap touch her mouth. Just a little, he said. Her tongue flicked once, slow and hesitant, then again. She swallowed with effort, a tiny motion of the throat that looked like a promise. Rowan exhaled the breath he'd been holding. His hands were steady, but his heart was not. He took his gloves off and pressed 2 fingers to the inside of her ear, checking warmth. Cold. Too cold. He thought of the nearest vet clinic 20 miles down the mountain road, if the pass stayed open. He thought of the time it would take, the likelihood of drifting snow. He thought of the note in his pocket like a stone. Forgive me. Forgiveness was a strange currency in a place like Ironvale. People traded in favors, in casseroles, in borrowed chains for tires. Forgiveness was rarer. Rowan spoke into the radio, voice controlled. Dispatch, this is Hale. I've got an animal emergency. German Shepherd puppy found in a metal toolbox off Forest Spur Road near the old turnout. Possible severe hypothermia. I'm heading toward town and then the clinic on Highway 9 if they're open. The dispatcher crackled back with surprise and concern, but Rowan barely heard the details. He kept his eyes on the puppy. She didn't shiver as violently now, or maybe the coat muffled it. Her breathing was still shallow, but it had rhythm. That rhythm felt like a thread, and Rowan held it like he was afraid winter might cut it. He glanced at her paws, at the faint abrasions on one pad, likely from metal edges or frantic scratching. You fought, he whispered, voice softer than the heater's hum. The puppy blinked once, slow, deliberate, and Rowan felt ridiculous as it sounded that she understood. Outside the windshield, snow thickened, the flakes bigger now, fat as feathers. The kind of snowfall that made the world look beautiful right before it became dangerous. Rowan eased the car onto the road and drove carefully, one hand steady on the wheel, the other resting near the bundled coat where the puppy lay. The town was only a few miles away, but in weather like this, distance was a liar. As he drove, his mind tried to assemble a list of practical steps. Warm, hydrate, get to vet, report abandonment, check missing pet postings. But beneath that, another list wrote itself in ink he didn't want to read. What if he was too late? What if he delivered her to a clinic that couldn't save her? What if Winter took yet another dog from him and left him standing there with empty arms and an old ache roaring back to life? He shook his head once, hard, as if he could fling the thought out the window. The puppy shifted slightly inside the coat. Her nose emerged, and she took a deeper breath, tasting the air that came from him, from life. Rowan didn't know her story. He didn't know who had left her or why. He didn't know how long she'd been trapped in that metal box with only the cold and that scrap of paper as company. But he knew one thing with a certainty that felt almost mythic, like an oath spoken on a mountain: she was not going back into the snow. He looked at her face, at the stubborn openness in her eyes, and the name came to him without effort, a single word that belonged beside firelight. "Ember," he said quietly. "That's what you are. A little ember refusing to go out." The puppy's gaze remained fixed on him, unblinking, as if she was measuring whether this was another human who would leave. Rowan drove on through the falling white, the patrol car a small moving refuge, and for the first time in a long time, his chest hurt in a way that wasn't only grief. It was something sharper, almost hopeful, like a door that had been frozen shut was beginning, inch by inch, to open. The mountain clinic on Highway 9 looked like it had been stitched together from leftover winters. The building squatted low against the wind, its white siding scarred by decades of snow and sun, its single blue porch light flickering like it was trying to remember hope. A faded sign swung above the door: North Ridge Veterinary Care. Rowan Hale pulled the patrol car beneath the overhang, cut the engine, and for a moment simply listened to the wind claw at the world. Ember lay bundled in his coat across the passenger seat, her breathing shallow but stubborn, the small rise and fall of her chest the most precious movement Rowan had seen in years. He lifted her carefully, shielding her from the wind with his body, and pushed through the door. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic, coffee, and animals that had lost and found their way too many times. A woman looked up from behind the counter. Dr. Evelyn Mercer, late 40s, slim, with silver threaded through dark hair pulled into a loose knot, eyes the color of old river stones. She had the posture of someone who carried responsibility the way others carried umbrellas, always, without thinking. Her expression shifted the moment she saw the puppy. "How long?" she asked, already moving. "Not sure," Rowan said, his voice hoarse. "Found her in a metal toolbox off Forest Spur. Hypothermia." Dr. Mercer didn't waste a second. "Exam room 2, now!" Two technicians appeared as if summoned by fear itself. Lena Ortiz, early 30s, compact, strong-armed, with a soft face that made frightened animals lean into her, and Mark Delaney, mid-20s, tall and freckled, all nervous energy and careful hands. They ushered Rowan into the exam room, where a heat lamp glowed over a stainless table. Ember was placed gently beneath it, her coat unwrapped. Rowan flinched at how small she looked against the metal, her ribs faint under fur, her paws pale with cold. Dr. Mercer checked Ember's gums, ears, chest, then placed a thermometer. Her brow tightened. "Core temp is dangerously low. Severe dehydration, mild pulmonary crackle, likely from cold exposure." She glanced at Rowan. "You got her here in time." Rowan released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Can you save her?" Dr. Mercer met his eyes, steady and honest. "We're going to try." They worked with quiet urgency. Warm IV fluids, oxygen, heated blankets. Rowan stood back against the wall, arms folded tight around himself, watching as life was coaxed back into a creature no one had been willing to fight for. Time thickened. Minutes became an ocean. The wind howled outside like the world was offended by hope. After nearly an hour, Ember's shivering softened into a tremor, then into something close to stillness. Her breathing steadied, just enough. Rowan slid down onto the small chair, head in his hands. Dr. Mercer finally turned to him. "She's stable for now. Next 48 hours are critical." "Thank you," Rowan said. The words felt too small for what she'd done. They moved Ember to a recovery crate near the back where the heat was strongest. Rowan stayed. He told dispatch he'd be unavailable. No one argued. As night pressed its blue-black face to the clinic windows, Rowan sat beside the crate, watching Ember's chest rise and fall. Memories came uninvited. The desert, the blast, the weight of a dog named Atlas in his arms. Atlas had been a K9 partner, once massive, disciplined, brave, in the way that made men feel unworthy. He had taken shrapnel, meant for Rowan. The war had taken Atlas and something else from Rowan too, something that never fully returned. Since then, Rowan kept people and animals at the same careful distance, close enough to care, far enough to survive losing them. At some point near dawn, Ember's eyes opened. They found Rowan's. She didn't whine, she didn't try to stand, she simply looked at him, long and quiet, like she had been waiting for him across centuries of snow. Rowan leaned forward. "Hey, little fire," he whispered. "You stayed." Her tail made the faintest movement against the blanket. Rowan smiled before he realized he was doing it. 2 days passed that way. Ember slept, woke, drank, slept again. Rowan barely left the clinic. He spoke little, but he was present in a way that surprised even himself. Wiping her muzzle, murmuring nonsense, telling her about Iron Veil Ridge, about the river that froze every winter, and the bakery that always smelled like cinnamon and second chances. He told her about the job, about the old patrol car that rattled when it was happy, about the quiet house he lived in where the kettle whistled too loudly because no one else was there to argue with it. On the third morning, Dr. Mercer declared Ember strong enough to move. "She'll need monitoring, warmth, fluids, no exertion." Rowan nodded. "I can handle that." "You live alone?" Dr. Mercer asked. "Yes." "Good," she said. "She'll need quiet." When Rowan carried Ember out into the snow again, she was wrapped in a borrowed blanket, her head resting against his chest like she'd always belonged there. The wind cut, but it didn't reach them. Back at the station, the news spread faster than snowmelt. Sheriff Calvin Roque, early 50s, wide as a doorway, beard like he'd been carved from pine bark, shook his head in disbelief when Rowan told him. Some people shouldn't be allowed near anything that breathes. Maggie Lou, dispatcher, mid-40s, elegant and sharp-tongued with a kindness that made grown men confess things they didn't mean to, brought over a box of old towels and a thermos of soup. "For both of you," she said. Rowan set up a temporary nest beside his desk. Ember slept, finally deep enough to dream. When she twitched in her sleep, Rowan felt the room shift as if gravity had changed its mind. He told himself he was only keeping her until she recovered. He told himself this was protocol. He told himself many things. That night, the storm returned. Snow swallowed the windows. The world narrowed to the warm light of the station and the sound of Ember breathing. Rowan sat beside her and listened to the quiet he had not known he was missing. He whispered, "You're going to make it." And for the first time since Atlas, he believed it. Iron Veil Ridge did not wake up. It thawed. The storm finally loosened its grip during the early hours, leaving the town wrapped in fresh white like a patient who had survived a long surgery. Chimneys breathed. The river whispered beneath its skin of ice. And inside the sheriff's station, a German shepherd puppy named Ember began the slow, stubborn business of living. Rowan Hale's desk had never looked like this. Towels layered the floor beside the heater. A borrowed dog crate stood open, its door tied back with orange twine. A metal bowl held water that Rowan warmed every hour because Ember still rejected anything cold. He had memorized the rhythm of her breathing, the subtle changes in the lift of her ribs, the way her ears twitched when he opened a file drawer. Rowan himself had not gone home in 2 days. He stood by the window when Sheriff Calvin Roque arrived, stamping snow from his boots. Calvin was a man built for blizzards, tall, wide, shoulders like the doorframe itself. His beard carried flecks of frost. His voice was gravel wrapped in wool. "She still holding?" Rowan nodded. "Better than yesterday." Calvin knelt beside Ember, removing one glove. Ember did not retreat. Her eyes followed Rowan, not the sheriff. "Stubborn little thing," Calvin said softly. "Like you." Rowan almost smiled. Word moved through Iron Veil faster than weather. By mid-morning, people began drifting in under the excuse of paperwork. Most came for Ember. Martha Kincaid, late 60s, small and fierce, owner of the town bakery, arrived first with a paper bag smelling of cinnamon and sugar. Years of kneading dough had thickened her wrists. She had once lost her husband to a logging accident and never let the town forget that grief could become generosity if you gave it time. "For the officer," she said, handing Rowan a pastry. "For the miracle," she added, kneeling beside Ember. Ember lifted her head an inch. Her tail moved. "Once." Martha pressed her hand to her mouth. Behind her came Owen Price, the high school janitor, broad-shouldered, slow-spoken. carrying a stack of old blankets he had used for the basketball team. Then Elena Ward, librarian, pale and thoughtful, with ink on her fingers and eyes full of quiet. Each of them paused beside Ember, whispering like church. Rowan watched the town assemble around a creature who, 2 days earlier, had nearly disappeared from the world. By afternoon, Ember ate half a bowl of warm food. When Rowan returned from the supply closet, she attempted to stand. Her legs wobbled. She fell. She tried again. Rowan dropped to the floor beside her. "Easy, fire." Ember did not listen. Her paws skidded. Her chest bumped into Rowan's knee. He steadied her, feeling her heartbeat under his palm. Stronger. Real. She lifted her head, and for the first time since he found her, Ember barked. It was not loud. It was not confident, but it was alive. The station froze. Rowan laughed. It came out of him before he could stop it. A full, genuine sound, the kind he had not heard from his own throat in years. It startled him. It startled Ember. She tilted her head, confused, then barked again. Maggie Lou, the dispatcher, appeared in the doorway holding coffee. She stopped. "Did I miss something holy?" she asked. Rowan wiped his face, still smiling. "She barked." Maggie's eyes shone. "Well, I'll be damned." That evening, Rowan finally drove home. He carried Ember inside, wrapped in his coat. His house was small, clean, quiet. The kettle whistled too loud, as always. He laid blankets beside the fireplace, adjusted the lamp, set her water and food close. Ember explored on unsteady legs. She sniffed the couch, the table leg, his boots. Then she came back and sat at his feet. Rowan lowered himself to the floor across from her. "I can't keep you," he said quietly, as if the walls might listen. "I work too much. This isn't a life for a puppy." Ember blinked. Her tail moved once. Rowan's chest tightened. Later that night, he dreamed of Atlas again. The desert wind, the heat, the weight of his dog in his arms. When Rowan woke, Ember was pressed against his ribs, warm and solid. He lay still and stared at the ceiling. The next day, Ember's strength doubled. She followed Rowan around the station. She watched him write reports. She waited when he left the room and brightened when he returned. By sunset, the town was using a new phrase. "Have you seen the fire dog?" The miracle puppy. The one that made Hale laugh. Rowan pretended not to hear. But when he locked the station and walked out into the falling snow, Ember trotting beside him, he realized something quiet and terrifying. The town had already chosen, and so had he. Winter returned with a different voice. The storm that arrived on Thursday did not roar. It whispered, and the whisper was more dangerous. Snow drifted down in heavy, patient sheets, soft enough to seem harmless, thick enough to erase the world one detail at a time. Pine trees blurred. Roads softened into memory. Ironvale Ridge became a snow globe shaken by something invisible and tired of waiting. Rowan Hale noticed it first when Ember refused her breakfast. She stood by the station door instead, ears high, nose lifted, every muscle alert. "What is it?" Rowan asked. Ember did not answer. The radio crackled. "Missing child reported, 6-year-old male, name Noah Callan. Last seen near the lower schoolyard at 2:40 p.m., weather worsening." Rowan was already moving. Noah Callan was the son of Daniel Callan, a widower who ran the auto shop on Pine Street. Daniel was broad and weathered, with hands scarred from engines and grief. He had raised Noah alone since his wife died of pneumonia 3 winters ago. The boy was small for his age, brown-haired, serious-eyed, known for asking questions no adult had time to answer. Rowan reached the schoolyard within minutes. Daniel stood in the snow with Principal Ruth Harrow, a thin woman in her late 50s whose gray hair was always too carefully arranged for Ironvale winters. Daniel's face was ash. "He went toward the woods," Daniel said. "He said he wanted to see the creek before it froze." The forest loomed beyond the fence, dark, silent, swallowing. Rowan knelt in the snow and removed his gloves. "Do you have something that belongs to him?" Daniel pulled off his scarf. "This. He wore it yesterday." Rowan held the wool to Ember's nose. Her body stiffened. Then she pulled, hard. Rowan followed. They entered the trees as snow thickened around them, erasing footprints within seconds. The world closed in. Branches clawed at their coats. Wind hissed through needles like a warning. Rowan's boots broke crusted drifts. His lungs burned. He tied the rope around his waist and the other end to Ember's harness. She moved with strange certainty, not running, not hesitating, weaving between trunks, following something older than training. Hours passed, light faded. Rowan called Noah's name until his throat bled sound. Ember stopped. She barked, sharp, repeated, urgent. Rowan pushed forward and saw it, a rock formation split by a narrow crevice, half hidden by snow. At the base, a shadow. "Noah!" a small voice answered. "Here." Rowan dropped to his knees and reached in. Noah lay wedged between stone and snow, shivering violently, lips blue, one leg twisted beneath him. Rowan slid his coat around the boy, pressing Ember close against Noah's chest. Ember curled her body over him, breathing warmth into the freezing air. Rescue arrived 40 minutes later. By the time they carried Noah down the mountain, Ember had not moved from his side. Daniel fell to his knees in the snow and wrapped his arms around both child and dog. "You saved him," he whispered. Rowan stood there shaking, snow gathering on his shoulders, watching Ember's tail wag slowly against the white. The storm faded overnight. By morning, Ironvale Ridge knew the story. They did not call Ember the miracle of Ironvale. They called her the heart of it. Spring did not arrive all at once in Ironvale Ridge. It tested the ground first. A little thaw at noon, a little snow again by dusk. The mountains seemed to argue with the sky about whether winter was truly finished. Ember healed faster than the town expected. Her ribs thickened, her eyes brightened. Her stride lengthened until she began to move like she had always belonged to the wind. Rowan watched it happen with a quiet mix of relief and fear. Relief that she was strong, fear of what strength always meant, the moment something became real enough to lose. By the time the last snow receded from the lower hills, Ember had begun her search training. The county assigned Caleb Morrow to oversee it, mid-40s, former state K-9 handler, narrow-eyed, lean as wire, a man whose voice carried the calm of someone who had outrun his own ghosts. He spoke little and observed everything. "She's got instincts," Caleb said, crouched beside Ember while she investigated a training scent trail. "Not raw talent, something steadier, like she expects the world to need her." Rowan didn't answer. He felt the truth of it in his bones. Ember passed every early test. By April, she was certified as a community search support dog, the first step toward full K-9 service. The town threw her a celebration behind the bakery. Martha baked a cake in the shape of a paw. Noah Callan, fully recovered now, louder than any child Rowan had ever known, tied a blue ribbon around Ember's neck and announced to the crowd, "She smells like hero." Rowan smiled the entire time, but peace never lasts long in mountains. It arrived as a letter. The envelope was thin, official, bearing a return address from the southern county. Rowan found it in his station mailbox after his shift. He stood under the humming fluorescent lights and read it twice before his hands started to shake. Inquiry regarding recovered German Shepherd puppy found Forest Spur Road. Potential prior ownership claim under investigation. Individual, Maribel Knox. Request for contact. The name meant nothing to him, at first. He drove to the address listed in the file. A small rental on the edge of a town 2 hours south, where winter had already surrendered and the air smelled of dust and dry grass. The house sagged under its own history. Wind chimes rattled on the porch like nervous thoughts. Maribel Knox answered the door. She was in her late 30s, thin, with brown hair pulled back too tightly as if afraid of losing control of something else. Her eyes were hollow in the way grief carves into people when they try too hard to survive it. "I know why you're here," she said before Rowan spoke. Inside, the house was clean and empty of warmth. No photos, no plants. A single toy sat on the table, a small plastic dinosaur. "My son," Maribel said, following Rowan's gaze. "He would have liked your dog." Rowan waited. "He died 2 years ago," she continued. "Car accident. I was driving." The words came out like she had practiced them until they no longer cut. "I found Ember 3 months ago on the highway," Maribel said. "She was wandering, starving. No collar, no chip. I tried to keep her. I really did. But every time I looked at her, I saw my son. Every time she breathed, I felt like I wasn't allowed to anymore." Rowan felt something tighten inside his chest. "I drove north. I thought, if I left her somewhere cold and clean, she might survive. If I gave her to winter, maybe God would decide for me." Her voice cracked. I couldn't kill her. I couldn't keep her. Rowan remembered the toolbox, the note. Forgive me. Maribel looked at him, terrified. Is she alive? Rowan nodded. She collapsed into the chair and covered her face. Rowan spoke gently. She saved a child. She's becoming a search dog. She has a life. Maribel's shoulders shook. I don't want her back, she said. I just needed to know she lived. I needed the guilt to stop breathing on me. Rowan stood. You gave her up in the wrong way, he said. But you did not give up on her. Maribel nodded through tears. When Rowan returned to Ironvale Ridge, the mountains were pink with evening light. Ember greeted him at the door, tail sweeping the air, eyes bright. He knelt and pressed his forehead to hers. She stays, he whispered. The paperwork moved quickly after that. Ember entered full K-9 training under Caleb's supervision. Rowan signed every form without hesitation. On the first day of official work, Ember wore her new harness. The badge shone against her chest. Rowan adjusted it with hands that did not tremble anymore. Ironvale Ridge had chosen them both. That night, Rowan walked Ember home. Spring stars cut holes in the dark. He unlocked the door. Ember stepped inside and turned in a slow circle before lying down exactly in the center of the floor, the place where a home becomes real. Rowan leaned against the wall and laughed quietly. You win, he said. Ember closed her eyes. Winter returned to Ironvale Ridge the following year, with less anger in its voice. The mountains still wore their white crowns. The river still whispered beneath glass. But something in the air had changed, not the temperature, but the way people walked through it. Ember had become part of the town's daily weather. By December, she had completed her full K-9 certification under Caleb Morrow's supervision. Her chest was broader now, her stride powerful and sure, the awkward puppy angles replaced by the balanced authority of a working dog. Her black and tan coat shone against the snow like ink on parchment. When she moved through the streets beside Rowan Hale, people stepped aside with smiles that carried both pride and comfort. Rowan had changed too. He no longer arrived early just to sit in his car before work. He no longer ate dinner standing over the sink. He no longer slept through the nights without dreams. They had rebuilt the old cabin at the edge of town together that spring, a place Rowan had once planned to sell. Now it was theirs. The fireplace crackled. The porch light burned every night. Ember slept on a rug beside Rowan's bed, her head resting on his boots as if guarding the version of him that had nearly disappeared. On the first heavy snowfall of December, Rowan and Ember stood outside watching the town settle into white. You almost took everything, Rowan said quietly to the storm, but not this time. Ember's tail brushed his leg. 3 days later, the call came. A snowmobile accident on the North Ridge. 2 hikers missing. Wind rising. Visibility dropping. Rowan and Ember were deployed before the plows reached the highway. The ridge was brutal. Sharp stone, blind drifts, cold that felt like teeth. Rowan's breath clouded his visor. Ember's paws cut perfect lines across untouched snow. They worked the slope in silence, guided by training and trust. Ember stopped suddenly. She lowered her nose. Her body stiffened. Then she ran. Rowan followed. They found the hikers in a narrow ravine, one injured, the other nearly unconscious. Ember pressed her body against the weaker man, sharing heat while Rowan radioed for extraction. When the rescue crew arrived, one of the men clutched Rowan's arm. That dog saved our lives. Rowan looked at Ember, her chest rising steady and strong, eyes bright even in the storm. She keeps doing that, he said. That night, Ironvale Ridge gathered at the town hall. The mayor spoke. The school choir sang. Noah Callan stood on a chair and announced, Ember is the bravest thing I know. Rowan didn't like crowds, but he stood there while the town applauded the dog that had once nearly died in silence. Later, he walked Ember home beneath falling snow. The mailbox outside the cabin was new, white, clean, untouched by rust. Ember stopped beside it. She sat, not waiting, remembering. Rowan knelt and rested his forehead against hers. I still don't know who put you in that box, he whispered, but I know what they gave me. Inside, the fire waited. So did the kettle. So did a life that had learned how to stay. Ember curled on her rug. Rowan lay on his bed. Snow fell without threat. For the first time in many winters, Iron Veil Ridge slept without fear of the cold. Because some things, once rescued, refuse to be lost again. This story reminds us that God still writes miracles in the quiet places of our lives. Not always with thunder or fire, but with a small heartbeat in the cold and a man who refuses to walk away. Rowan did not plan to be a hero, and Ember did not plan to survive yet. God placed them on the same road, in the same winter, at the exact moment hope was needed most. That is how miracles work. They arrive when we are tired, when we are broken, when we think it is too late. In our own lives we face winters of the heart, moments when the world feels too heavy and the cold too deep. But if we choose compassion, if we choose to stop, if we choose to care, God will meet us there and something beautiful will begin again. A second chance is not just for dogs or lost towns. It is for every one of us. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that lift the soul. May God bless you. May He protect your home and may He place light on your path even in the darkest season. If you believe in miracles, write amen in the comments.